So how exactly should you be EQing and compressing your drum samples within your heavy mix? And also, how exactly should you be using parallel compression on your drums, if at all? Welcome to Viewer Questions Answered, episode 10. Okay, so without any further ado, let's jump into this excellent group of questions sent in by my loyal email subscribers. And question number 1 comes from Jeff. Hi Bobby, hope you're doing well. I've been working on a hard rock mix with drum samples from the Slate SSD CLA pack. I'm trying to figure out if I should process all of the kick mics as one or EQ the in and out mic separately. Any tips on this subject is greatly appreciated. Thanks. Jeffrey Smith, Midland, Texas. Well, Jeff, thank you for your question, and it's a very good one because the truth is there is no right or wrong way to process your drums or mix your drums and how you group them together and how you EQ or compress them. But I will give you my approach, and also I want to shine some light on how you should be approaching mixing in your drum samples with your live drums. The thing you have to remember is that these drum samples, for the most part, are already EQ'd and compressed to sound great right out of the gate. So if you are gonna group, let's say your kick drum in mic mixed with the kick drum out mic together and process them together as one, more often than not, you're gonna wanna make sure that you don't over process your kick sample if you're blending in a kick sample with your raw, mic'd kick drum sounds, both the in and outside kick drum mics. So as an example here, let's just use our kick drum again as an example. What I would do is bust both my inner kick and out kick to a submix, EQ and compress that, and then EQ and compress my kick sample separately. That way I don't overdo the EQ again on my kick sample. Very simple, straight to the point. It's just a matter of balancing how much processing you're applying to your individual drum tracks. So to drive this point home, let me be ultra clear. Let's say you have a kick sample that's nice and bright with a lot of attack. You have a kick drum inside mic and a kick drum outside mic, and you bust all three to a kick drum submix. It can be tricky because your raw drum tracks that are the microphones might need more processing. Actually, they will more than likely need more processing than the sample itself. So again, that's why I choose to process my live drums and my samples, if I'm using pre-made samples like the Slate pack, separately. And as far as if you should be processing your inner and outer mic together, that's completely up to you. Sometimes I do them together and sometimes I do them separately. It really depends on the source sounds and how well they're blending together in their natural state. If they sound worlds apart, then I might just process them completely separately and then bust them, not so much for EQ, but for control and simplicity within the mix. So in other words, it's much easier to ride a single fader for both my kick drum mic tracks than to have to automate them individually. So Jeff, thank you for your question. Hopefully that clears things up for you on how you should be using your drum samples and or how you should be bussing your individual kick drum microphones or drum microphones in general. Thanks again. Okay, this leads us to question number 2, and this question comes from Frank. Hi Bobby, still loving the channel. I have a question for your subscribers questions video. What's your take on parallel compression on drums? As in, should you always use it, and on both real and MIDI drums? Or are samples good enough as they are? Cheers from the Netherlands, Frank. Okay, Frank, well, this is the way that I like to think of parallel compression. Well, let me just say this. I do use parallel compression sometimes. Sometimes I just use broadband, just normal compression on my drum mix with no parallel compression at all. And sometimes I use no compression on my drum submix at all. It really depends on the sound I'm going for. And I just want to say this, it doesn't matter if I'm doing this with live drums or MIDI drums or program drums, I approach it the same. Now, when we're talking about the individual channels and processing, that's different. I usually process way less with MIDI drums because MIDI drums generally sound great right out of the box. But as far as my submix, I approach it exactly like live drums. So here's the way I like to think of parallel compression. If I want more like excitement out of my drums and I want them to sound a little more hyped, I will use parallel compression because you could be much more extreme with the compression because you're blending the non-compressed and compressed drum sound together. So it's much more subtle and you don't really notice the compression as much. But again, that's if I want my drums to sound really exciting and bombastic and over the top. Let's say I like my drum mix, but I want them to just sound slightly more glued together. Then I'll just use a little bit of subtle compression on my drum submix, and that's about it. No parallel compression at all. And then finally, if I'm working on a mix where I want the mix to sound very, very open, very natural, not overly hyped, maybe a little more old school, a little more, analog, I guess you can say. Then I'll use no compression on my drum submix, maybe just a tape saturator, and that's about it. It really depends on my mood that day and what I'm going for within the production. So I can't give you a blanket statement. It really comes down to what you're looking for. There are some engineers that always use parallel compression, and then there are others, like for example, Andy Sneap, that doesn't really use any compression on his drum submix at all because he doesn't even submix his drums. So there is no right or wrong. It really comes down to what you like. What I recommend is just experiment and see what really grabs your attention, what grabs, what sounds palatable to you, and just use it in your mixes. And don't be afraid to experiment. So Jeff, thank you for your question. It was a good one. Okay, and our next question here comes from Antoine. Hey Bobby, great vids and really helpful tips for an aspiring 30-year-old producer. I have a couple of questions. I've been attempting to produce my own band's music for around a year. Started during the lockdown last April in France and can't seem to find the courage to throw it out there and make people listen to it. Except for my wife, as she can't bear it anymore. Dude, I know exactly what you mean. How do you overcome that fear of judgment by others? Also, my other bandmates don't help a lot with the writing and producing, but are always fast to critique my choices. As the producer, how do you deal with artists, and in this situation, my friends, that are constantly unhappy and wanting to change things in the song or the mix after you spent countless hours on a song? Cheers from France, Antoine. Okay, well, Antoine, your question is a loaded question, and I can go on and on and on about this topic for hours, but I will try and sum it up for you because it is an excellent question. I should probably make a full video on this. But anyway, let me just start here. As far as having the courage to put your music out there, dude, what you're experiencing is completely normal, and most artists of any kind, whether it's music or painting or sculpting, or if you're an architect, it's gonna be the same thing. None of us wanna hear people say negative things about our work. But with that being said, you have to overcome this. And by the way, I'm speaking to myself here, and just put it out there, because you have to expect there's always gonna be someone that's gonna say something about your work, even if it's amazing. Remember, people are often jealous of others that even have the courage to put out their music or work in general or art in general in the first place. So you have to just get used to that. So don't let this stop you. I highly recommend putting out your work if it's finished. Now, the second part of your question is another good one when it comes to people constantly being quick to critique your work. Dude, I've been there with bandmates, and I've certainly been there when it comes to working in the studio with others. And honestly, it really comes down to this. You have to be honest and straightforward with them. If they're not putting in the work, and especially if you're doing a lot of the writing and producing, you're running the show. Now, it's human nature. People are always quick to judge and critique without doing any work themselves. So you just have to kind of get used to this and tell them, hey, if you don't like the mix, then you try mixing it. That's what I ended up having to do in multiple situations throughout my career. Now, I just want to add this. If you end up working with other artists, the way you want to deal with this is make sure that they hear your work and that they like your work in the first place, and that they're not hiring you to sound like another producer. That is an instant one-way ticket to pain in the ass city. So in other words, if a band contacts me and asks to hire me, and they all of a sudden say to me, oh, we want your mixes to sound like, I don't know, Jordan Valerian. Oh no, we want the mix to sound like Joey Sturgis. I'll immediately just say, well, you hired the wrong guy. Hire them. And I don't mean this in a negative way. I just know that I will never be able to copy someone else. And most of us, we're all individual. Our mixes sound the way that we hear. And when a band hires you, they should be hiring you simply due to the fact that they want you to produce their record because they like the sound that you already have. So that would be my overall general advice here. If your band is driving you insane, just be straightforward and say, hey, I'm doing all the work. If you want a different mix, try mixing it yourself. That's what I've done in the past, and it always seems to work and shuts them up immediately. So Antoine, thank you for this excellent question. I will be covering this topic more in the future because I feel it's really important and it's something that we all have to face as producers and artists in general. So thanks again for your excellent question. Okay, and our next question comes from Jeff. We have two Jeffs in one episode, except this Jeff is spelled with one F. I've been really honing my skills as a mixer over the past couple of years, and I feel like I'm at a point where I can confidently mix and produce people as a full-time job. I'd really like to replace my current full-time job with music, but really don't know where to start getting clients and how to charge for my work. For the time being, I post videos on YouTube showcasing my abilities, kind of like a portfolio. What's a good place to go to look for work? Okay, Jeff, well, I get this question a lot, and again, it's a good one. And I'm gonna give you my opinion and what I would do if I was starting all of this again. Now, I've covered this in this series, but I feel like this is a very important topic, and it really bears repeating. Well, first of all, I just want to say this. If you're already putting out a portfolio and continually adding to it, keep doing that. The worst thing is when people are too nervous to put their work out there and expect to gain clients. And at the end of the day, why would anyone hire you if you don't have your work out there? So the fact that you're doing that is excellent, and I highly suggest to continue doing that. Now, here's the cold hard truth, but it's really important to know. No one will come and hire you if they've never heard of you or they haven't heard your work. So what this means is you have to go out there and add value to some band to get started. Now, what I'd highly recommend is finding a band that you really like and contacting them and just starting a relationship, asking questions about the band, showing interest in their music for real, and share your portfolio with them and mention to them that you're willing to do one mix or one song for free. Now, the key here is to do this with a quality band that's somewhat professional. You don't want to go after bottom feeder bands that are just going to waste your time and not appreciate the work that you do in the first place. Now, most people, when they hear this seems counterproductive. Why would you do something for free if you're trying to make an income doing this? And here's the reality. If you do a killer job with this band for one free single, they're gonna want more. And that's when you offer to do it for, a fair amount of money. And if they're a quality band, they definitely will have friends that they play with and other, local bands that they might regularly play shows with. And those bands will hear their work and then ask who did it, and they will contact you, and the snowball just grows and grows and grows to the point where you don't have enough time to work with all the bands that will contact you. Believe me, it will happen if you're consistent and do these things that I just mentioned, as long as your work is at a professional level. Now, I know you mentioned that you have a day job. Obviously, you don't want to quit your day job, but keep working your day job and maybe offer, like I said, a free single to a client or a band that's really good. And again, little by little, as you become more in demand, you could slowly cut back on your day job or eventually quit your day job. And that's really how this happens in the real world. So Jeff, thank you for your question, and definitely keep me posted on how things are working out for you when it comes to attracting clients. I'd love to know your progress. Okay, and our final question here comes from Mr. Jeremy. What's up, Avi? How would you go about EQing instruments during an 808 bass drop? Is there a technique so the other instruments won't drown in the low frequencies but still drive the subwoofer? Thanks, dude. Jeremy. Okay, well, Jeremy, great question, and I have a very simple answer. Most instruments in a typical rock or metal mix do not need much information below 40 hertz anyway. I generally will roll off my kick drum between 30 and 40, maybe even 45, maybe even 50 hertz if I don't need that super duper low end, or it's just not adding impact and just eating up headroom for no reason. And most pro mixers do this as well. It's pretty much standard practice. So with that being said, if you apply these principles to your mixes, you'll automatically have a little bit of extra room in a deep sub area where your sub bass drops will fit perfectly. And with that being said, if you want to see all of my roll-off points and all of my general EQ settings that I start out with when I start a mix, there's a link below to my free quick EQ guide. I highly recommend downloading it and just taking a look and seeing where I roll off most of my instruments. Now, yes, this will change from mix to mix, but it's a good starting point. So again, you can download that guide for absolutely free. There's a link below in this video's description. So hopefully this makes sense to you. Again, for me, the lowest instrument within my mix is always the kick drum, and I will always roll off between 30, 40 hertz. And by doing this, I have some room in the 20 to 30 hertz range where my sub or 808 drops can live and have room, and there's some extra headroom in the mix as well. People often get into trouble where they don't do enough high passing and they try to cram 808s and low-endy synths into their mix and wonder why it doesn't sound clear or it just sounds muddy when they listen in their car. And more often than not, this is the reason why. And by doing this, you'll have extra room in your sub range. So Jeremy, thank you for your question. It was a good one, and hopefully that points you in the right direction. So I just like to shout out and thank everyone for sending in these excellent questions. Now, if you've sent me a question and I haven't gotten to it yet, be patient. I will get to it within one of these upcoming videos. If you found this video helpful, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And do not forget to click the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I upload one of my weekly videos on all things metal and rock production. You can both like and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the description below. And again, you can download my quick EQ guide for absolutely free. There's a link below in this video's description. Download it for absolutely free and enjoy. Until next time, happy mixing.